I sat in the driver's seat of my car, staring at the front door of Mia's house. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight that my knuckles were white. I hadn't intended to be here. Hell, I didn't want to be here, but I had to. I had to know. "Are you sure about this?" Brian asked from the passenger seat. He was trying to keep his voice steady, but I could hear the edge of uncertainty in it. Jake, sitting in the back, didn't say anything. He just stared out the window, his jaw tight. I nodded but didn't answer. What was there to say? I didn't need anyone to tell me what was happening. I could feel it in my gut. The late nights Mia had been coming home, the texts I wasn't allowed to see, the excuses that never quite added up. For months I had pushed it aside, hoping I was overthinking things. But deep down, I knew the truth. And tonight, I was going to prove it. We had been parked here for over an hour, watching Mia's every move. She had told me she was going out with friends tonight, but that didn't explain why she had been texting someone for the last 2 hours straight. I had seen the name pop up on her phone, Mark. When I saw Mia step out of the house with him, my heart hit the floor. Mark, a guy I had met a few times, someone she always claimed was just a friend. Bullshit. Mia and Mark didn't even look like friends. There was something in their body language, something I couldn't ignore, that made my stomach churn. She smiled up at him, laughing at something he said, and he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. They didn't see me, and they didn't care. Not once did Mia glance around or show any sign of awareness that she was being watched. Brian shifted nervously in the seat beside me, his eyes flickering between me and the scene unfolding in front of us. "Man, you don't have to do this. There's gotta be another way." But there wasn't. I could feel the weight of the betrayal sinking deeper with every passing second. I wanted to confront her right then, to get out of the car and scream at her, to demand answers. But I had to wait. I had to make sure I was right. And tonight, I was going to be right. Mark put his arm around Mia's waist as they made their way to his car. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just a kiss. It wasn't just some accidental brush of hands. The way they were touching, the way she leaned into him. No, this was something more. It was real. I felt the rage building inside of me, like fire spreading through my veins. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to break something. But most of all, I wanted to confront Mia. I wanted to demand an explanation, even though I already knew the answer. There was no coming back from this. She had betrayed me. I couldn't watch anymore. I shoved the car into drive, barely glancing at Brian or Jake before speeding away. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just needed to get out of there, to get away from the house and everything inside of me that was screaming. Back on the road, Brian broke the silence. "You saw it, didn't you?" I didn't answer at first. I couldn't. My mind was racing. Every word, every action, every doubt I'd ever had about Mia flooded my thoughts. The life we had built together, the future I thought we shared, all of it, crumbling in a matter of seconds. "Yeah," I finally said, my voice low, cold. "I saw it." Jake cleared his throat. "So, what now?" Now, I thought, gripping the steering wheel harder. Now, everything changes. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. I didn't care about the streets, the cars, or the lights. My mind was consumed with the images of Mia and Mark, that laugh, the way she leaned into him like she hadn't been married to me for the last 6 years. I could feel the anger bubbling up, mixing with the disbelief. But one thing was crystal clear. I wasn't going to let this slide. I pulled into the parking lot and slammed the car into park, still staring ahead, barely seeing the other cars around me. Brian and Jake sat in silence. They didn't need to say anything. They both knew what had to happen next. "You know what we're doing, right?" I asked, my voice sharp. I wasn't asking for confirmation. I needed them to understand. Brian was the first to speak, his voice steady but tense. "You sure about this, man? This is bigger than just calling her out. You're going to have to live with this." I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. I knew what I was about to do, and part of me wanted to rip it all apart, to drag Mia into the chaos I was feeling, to make her understand the magnitude of her betrayal. "I don't care," I finally said, my words harsh. "I've been living with this for months, not knowing, watching her lie to my face. She's been lying to me for months. I'm done. I'm done pretending." Jake, who had been quiet, finally spoke up from the back seat. "You want us to help? We're in, man. Just tell us what you need." I turned to him, and for the first time tonight, I felt something like relief. I wasn't alone in this. I wasn't the only one who had seen what Mia had done. They both knew what needed to be done. I need her to feel what I've felt. I want to take control, I said, my voice low, cold. She's not going to get away with this, not after everything. Brian nodded and Jake's eyes hardened. They were in. I could feel it. All right, Brian said, his voice steady. So, what's the plan? We don't have much time before she figures out what's going on. I leaned back in the driver's seat and closed my eyes, thinking. I could feel the anger rising again, the need to do something, anything to regain control of this situation. We're going to make her question everything, make her realize she's not the one in control anymore. We'll start with the lights. Take everything from her, piece by piece. Jake looked over at me, a dark smile spreading across his face. I'm with you. Let's do it. I felt a grim satisfaction at that. This wasn't about punishment. This was about regaining what I had lost. Mia had taken my trust, my heart, and now I was going to take back everything she had built on lies. All right, I said, taking a deep breath. First, we cut the power. She'll be in the dark, literally and figuratively. Brian looked at me, his expression serious. And what happens after that? I met his gaze. We confuse her, flood the house with fog machines and black out the power. Let her feel lost, just like I did. We hit her where it hurts, I continued, my voice icy. She's going to know that I'm done. This time, there are no excuses. Jake grabbed a duffel bag from the floor of the car, unzipping it to reveal the supplies we'd need. Smoke grenades, wire cutters, everything we'd need to make Mia's perfect little world fall apart. I felt the cold weight of the plan settle in my chest. I wasn't just reacting anymore. This was methodical. This was calculated. Let's go, I said, my voice final. We're doing this now? The three of us stepped out of the car and headed for the back alley that led to the power box behind Mia's house. I could already feel the tension in the air, like we were on the verge of something irreversible. We didn't talk as we made our way to the house. Every step felt like a step toward an ending to all the lies Mia had fed me, all the pain she had caused me. Brian handed me the wire cutters. I gripped them tightly, knowing that once the power went out, Mia wouldn't have a chance to hide behind any more excuses. She would have to face what she'd done. I approached the electrical box, my heart pounding in my chest. With one clean cut, the lights flickered and then went out completely, plunging the house into darkness. We've started, I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. I looked at Jake, who was already pulling out the smoke grenades. Brian gave me a nod. We were in this together. Now there was no turning back. As the smoke grenades hissed to life, releasing their thick clouds of confusion into the house, I felt a rush of satisfaction. Mia wouldn't be able to see anything, couldn't even think straight. For the first time in months, I had the upper hand. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. Mia would never walk away from this without feeling the consequences. The thick, acrid smoke filled the air, curling around the house like a living, suffocating thing. I could hear the muffled sounds of Mia and Mark inside, their voices suddenly sharp and disoriented, as if they were no longer sure which direction to take. The lights had gone out moments before, plunging the house into darkness, and the smoke was only making it worse. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction wash over me, though it was cold and distant. I wasn't here for revenge in the way most people would think of it. No, this was something different. This was about balance. Mia had taken control of everything, my trust, my love, and my dignity. Now, it was my turn. We're good, Jake muttered from behind me. I could feel his presence even though the smoke had thickened, wrapping us all in a gray, claustrophobic haze. I nodded, pulling my jacket tighter around me, though the night air was colder than I had expected. My eyes flicked between the front of the house and the back, the ground littered with fallen leaves that crunched under our feet. Brian, who had already made his way to the side of the house, gave me a quick thumbs up. The place is completely disoriented. Mia's not going to know what hit her. We waited for the first signs of chaos. It didn't take long. I heard Mia's voice, panic creeping into her tone. Mark, where are you? What's going on? Mark! I leaned back against the fence, listening as the smoke began to thicken, seeping through the cracks around the windows. The confusion inside was palpable. Mia had no idea where I was, what was going on, or how much trouble she was in. She thought she had been the one pulling the strings. Tonight, she would see how wrong she was. Mark's voice, heavy with irritation, came next. "What the hell is this? I can't see anything. Mia, do you know what's happening?" I felt a twisted satisfaction surge through me. They were helpless. They were as vulnerable as I had been in the months leading up to this moment. The air was heavy, charged with tension. The smoke grenades had done their job, disorienting them completely. They weren't thinking clearly anymore, and that was the point. "Phase 1's complete," I whispered, mostly to myself. "Now, we move on to Phase 2. I could almost feel Brian's grin in the dark as he joined me, his face illuminated only by the faint glow of his phone screen. Time to turn up the heat. I didn't need him to say anything more. We all knew what had to happen next. The smoke was just the beginning. Now, we needed Mia to truly feel the weight of everything she had done. Brian moved to the side of the house, pulling out a phone from his pocket. He sent a quick text, and within seconds, the sound of Mia's phone ringing from the other side of the house echoed through the air. She hadn't noticed the message yet, but she would soon. I knew what would happen next. The panic, the realization. The music from inside grew louder, muffled by the thick walls of the house. It seemed almost like a dream, like everything happening inside was a blur, just out of reach, but within my control. Mia wouldn't be able to escape this. Not now. Not after what she had done to me. "She's still calling out for Mark," Jake said, standing next to me. He was breathing heavily, his voice hushed. "She thinks this is just some weird electrical issue, but she'll figure it out." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I could already hear her voice breaking through the confusion, this time more frantic, more desperate. "Mark, why aren't you answering me? Where did you go?" The panic was rising. It didn't take long for the door to creak open, the silhouette of Mia stumbling out onto the porch. She squinted into the dark, her hands waving in front of her face, as though trying to feel her way through the smoke. I stayed hidden, watching from the shadows. I wanted to see the fear in her eyes when she realized what was happening. I wanted to see how small she'd become, how everything she thought she had built crumbled in the span of a few moments. "Mark!" Mia's voice cracked. "Please, just tell me what's going on." I could hear her footfalls on the porch, stumbling, and then a brief moment of silence. That was the moment I knew it was time. I pulled out my phone, a single message already typed in the draft. I hit send, watching the little bubbles appear on her phone screen as she read it. "I know everything." I watched her pause, her breath caught in her throat, as if she had just been punched. Her body went rigid, and she stared at the message, frozen in place. I could feel the weight of her realization hanging in the air. The phone slipped from her hand. "John," she whispered, her voice trembling. It was the first time she had said my name like that in weeks, but it was too late for apologies, too late for explanations. Her world was crumbling, and it felt fucking good. I let out a breath, one I didn't even realize I was holding, and let the chaos unfold from the darkness. The smoke was starting to dissipate, but the tension inside the house only grew. I could see Mia's figure through the thick haze, stumbling forward, disoriented and helpless. She squinted into the night, eyes darting around, looking for something, someone. But she couldn't see us. "Mark?" Her voice cracked as she took another step forward, her body tense, as if bracing for some kind of impact. She was confused, and I could see the panic creeping in. She had no idea what was happening, no clue that this was all planned. My heart was pounding in my chest. I couldn't explain why the feeling of control was so satisfying. Maybe it was the way she had always controlled everything in our lives. But now, the tables had turned, and I was finally going to make her feel the weight of her betrayal. I didn't want to wait any longer. The moment felt like it was stretched too thin, like the suspense was unbearable. It was time to confront her. "Let's go," I muttered to Brian and Jake, my voice low but steady. They nodded without a word, and we made our move toward the front of the house. As we stepped onto the porch, I saw Mia's face, a mix of confusion and disbelief, as she finally spotted us. Her eyes widened and her breath caught. For a moment, there was a strange silence, a stillness in the air before everything erupted. "Mia," I said, my voice steady, almost cold. She flinched at the sound of my voice, her body stiffening as she turned toward me, her face pale in the dim light. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but the words were stuck, like she couldn't figure out how to explain herself. The woman who had always been so confident, so sure of everything, now looked small, vulnerable. John, I didn't know. Don't, I interrupted, my tone harsh, cutting her off before she could finish the sentence. Don't try to explain yourself. I don't need to hear it. She looked at me, her eyes filled with that familiar mix of fear and guilt. It was the look I had seen so many times over the years when she had done something wrong, but this time, it was different. This time, the consequences weren't something I would just forgive. She took a shaky breath, her hand outstretched like she was trying to reach me, but I stepped back, keeping my distance. I wasn't about to let her manipulate me again. Mia, I repeated, my voice colder now. I saw you. I saw everything. The way you looked at him, the way you touched him. I saw it all. Her face turned bright red, and she stumbled back slightly as if she had been struck. John, please, you don't understand. No, I said, cutting her off again. I understand perfectly. I understand exactly what's been going on behind my back for months. The late nights, the secretive texts, the lies you told me. I know everything, Mia. I could see her wavering, her lips parted, but no words came out. She was speechless, unable to form the lies she usually had at the ready. This time, there was nothing she could say to make it better. She had betrayed me, and there was no coming back from that. Mark isn't just a friend, is he? I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. You've been sleeping with him, haven't you? Mia's eyes welled with tears, and for a second, I almost felt a flicker of sympathy. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. This wasn't about sympathy anymore. This was about the truth. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Yes, I've been seeing him. I didn't mean for it to happen, John, but I shook my head, the anger inside me boiling to the surface. Don't try to explain. You don't get to explain this. You chose him. You chose to betray me. She took another step toward me, reaching out like she was trying to touch me, but I pulled away. Her hand hung in the air, trembling, and she looked at me like she was expecting me to forgive her, to tell her everything would be okay. But there was no going back. I thought we had something special, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't mean to hurt you, John. Please, just let me explain. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, after all the lies, she still thought she could talk her way out of this. No, Mia, I said, my voice firm now. There's nothing left to explain. You've broken something that can't be fixed. She stepped back, her hands dropping to her sides. Her face crumpled as if the reality of the situation was finally sinking in. She had nothing left. No excuses, no lies, no apologies that would matter. You were everything to me, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't want to hurt you. I don't know what happened. I just got lost. I stared at her for a long moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air. But I couldn't feel sorry for her, not anymore. You chose him, Mia, I said again, my voice steely, unyielding. And you lost me the moment you did. She stood there, frozen, her face streaked with tears, as I turned my back and walked away. I didn't need to look back. I didn't need to hear her plead for forgiveness. The truth was final. The trust was gone. And I wasn't going to let her take another ounce of my soul. I didn't even make it back to my car before Mia was calling me. Her name flashed across my phone screen, but I didn't answer. She could leave her voicemail, just like she always did. That's how it worked with us. The silent, unspoken understanding that things were broken, but we'd try to keep the facade up for a little longer. It wasn't until the second call came in, then the third, that I finally pulled over to the side of the road. I stared at the phone, letting it ring a few more times before I swiped to answer. John, please. Mia's voice came through, shaky and raw. Please don't do this. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I could hear the desperation in her voice, and part of me almost wanted to feel something for her, a small flicker of empathy. But I pushed it away. It wasn't her apology I needed. It wasn't even the explanation she was offering. I had listened to all of that for months. It was empty now. Don't apologize, I said, my voice flat. It doesn't mean anything anymore. John, please, she pleaded again, her voice cracking. I swear, I never meant for it to get like this. Mark just made me feel seen. He made me feel wanted when you were always so distant. The words hit harder than I expected, and I felt something stir in me, something bitter. She was trying to justify it. She was trying to twist this into something that wasn't her fault. But that was just She had made a choice, and no amount of reasoning was going to change that. I was never distant, Mia. You made your choice, I said, my words cutting through the phone line. Don't turn this around on me. You chose him, and now you have to live with that. You have to live with the fact that you've betrayed me. There was a long pause, and I could almost picture her there, standing in that empty, dark house, staring at the mess she had made. Part of me wanted to feel bad for her. The other part, that part was satisfied. It was the part of me that knew I deserved better. I deserved more than to be lied to be discarded when things got hard. You've broken something I can't fix, I added, my voice cold now, every word deliberate. You took my trust, Mia. And now you're asking me to just forget it. You don't get that. I know, she whispered, the words barely audible. I know, and I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't mean to hurt you. Mia, I cut her off, not letting her finish. Don't even try to explain. I'm done listening. You had months to fix this, but you didn't. You made your bed, and now you have to sleep in it. There was a small, painful silence on the other end of the line. I could feel her emotions spilling through the phone, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I had been a fool to think we could get past this, to think she could just explain it away, and everything would be fine. The truth was, I had been fighting for a relationship that only existed in my mind. Mia had already checked out long before I figured it out. I'm coming over, Mia said suddenly, her voice more determined now. We need to talk. I don't care what you say. We need to fix this. I can't just let it end like this, John. I took a slow breath, the air feeling heavier as the conversation dragged on. She was still clinging to this idea that somehow she could fix it. But the reality was, we were done. And no amount of talking would change that. You don't need to come over, I said firmly. There's nothing left to fix. Please, John, she begged, her voice breaking. I'll do anything. Just don't walk away from me. I can't lose you. I squeezed my eyes shut, the weight of her words hitting me harder than I wanted to admit. Part of me wanted to give in, wanted to hold her, to tell her it was all okay. But the other part, the stronger part, knew I couldn't. Because if I did, I'd be telling myself that I was okay with being second place in her life, that I was okay with being the fallback when things weren't working with Mark. Goodbye, Mia, I said, my voice resolute. Don't come over. Don't call me anymore. I'm done. I ended the call before she could say anything else. My phone dropped into the passenger seat like a weight, and I sat there for a moment, letting the silence fill the car. The calmness that followed was almost eerie, the anger, the confusion. It was all gone now. I had made the decision. There was no going back. I didn't feel relief, not yet. But I knew I was right. Walking away was the only thing left to do. It was time to cut ties, completely. As I started the car and drove away from Mia's house for what I hoped would be the last time, I couldn't help but wonder how long it would take for her to realize the depth of her loss. Because I had already made up my mind. She didn't get to have it both ways, and I wasn't going to be her safety net anymore. The game was over, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was the one in control. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of messages and missed calls, all from Mia. The screen of my phone lit up like a Christmas tree, one notification after another. I stared at the glowing screen, the weight of it all sinking in. It felt surreal, almost like I was waiting for the punchline of a cruel joke. But there was no joke. This was real. I didn't bother listening to the voicemails. I already knew what they'd say. Apologies, pleas, promises that it would never happen again. I didn't need to hear them. I had heard enough of her broken promises over the last few months. I sat in silence, holding the phone in my hand. The weight of everything I'd just done, of cutting Mia out, telling her it was over, felt heavy in a way I hadn't expected. A small part of me was relieved, like a weight had been lifted. But there was another part of me, the part that still cared, that wanted to pick up the phone and tell her it was okay, that wanted to believe her when she said she was sorry. But I didn't. I couldn't. I felt the sting of betrayal again, and it was like a punch to the gut every time I let myself think about it. Mia had made her choice, and I wasn't going to be the one left behind picking up the pieces. Not anymore. I silenced the phone and threw it on the couch, rubbing my hands over my face. The reality of everything settled in, like a stone dropped into a deep well. What now? What came after this? I couldn't stay in this apartment forever, living in the aftermath of something I thought was real. The phone buzzed again, but this time it was from Brian. I picked it up without thinking. Yo, you good? Brian's voice came through, low but steady. I could hear the concern in his words. Yeah, I said, the words sounding emptier than I intended. Just dealing with some stuff. You need anything, man? Want me to come over? I stared at the phone, his offer hanging there for a beat. Brian wasn't the type to pressure me, but I knew what he was really asking. He was worried, and I appreciated that more than I could express, but I didn't want to talk about it. Not yet. I'll be fine, I finally said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. I just need some time. I hear you, he said, his tone softening. But you're not alone in this, all right? You know that, right? I closed my eyes, breathing in slowly. Yeah, I know. Thanks, man. All right, just don't stay cooped up too long. You need to get out, hit the gym, whatever it takes. Let me know if you need anything. I will, I said, but I didn't know if I meant it. I hung up and threw the phone back onto the couch. The silence was deafening now. Mia's voice, the sound of her calling me, begging me, every minute of it was a reminder of what I had lost. I wasn't just losing her. I was losing the life we had built, the future I thought was ours. And for the first time, I wondered if I had made the right choice. Later that day, I found myself walking through the city, the streets busy with the rush of life. But I felt detached, like I was walking in a fog. I had been here 1,000 times before, but today, everything felt unfamiliar. I could still feel Mia's presence lingering, even though she was miles away. It was like her betrayal was tattooed on my skin, impossible to wash off. I walked for hours, not really heading anywhere. Just needed the movement, the constant rhythm of my feet against the pavement. Every step was a step further from her, from us. I stopped at a cafe, ordered a coffee, and sat by the window, staring out at the crowd. People moved in and out of the place, talking, laughing, living their lives. And for the first time in a long time, I realized something. I didn't belong in the life Mia had built. I never had. We had created this shared existence out of convenience, or maybe out of need. I had been a piece in her world, but I had never been her whole world. She had made that clear the moment she chose Mark over me. She had chosen him, and now I had to live with that. But I was starting to see the truth in a different way. I wasn't just walking away from her. I was walking away from the person I had allowed myself to become. The person who put her first, who let her walk all over me without question. I was better than that. And for the first time, I felt like I was starting to understand what it meant to put myself first. The phone buzzed in my pocket again, but this time, I ignored it. It wasn't Mia. It was a message from Jake. "Everything okay?" he asked. I didn't know what to say. Instead of replying, I turned my attention back to the street outside the cafe. I could feel the weight of everything on my shoulders, but I didn't feel the need to talk about it. Not yet. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the silence. It felt like space. Space to breathe, to think. Space to be myself again. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet. Mia had stopped calling, and while that should have been a relief, it only made the emptiness more pronounced. The silence was all-consuming, and every time I thought I had moved on, a memory would hit me, knocking me off balance. It wasn't until I saw a photo of her and Mark on social media, her laughing, his arm draped around her, her eyes shining with the kind of happiness I had never seen in the last few months, that I realized something. I was done. I had let her control my thoughts, my emotions, my future for far too long. I wasn't going to be that person anymore, and so, with that, I deleted everything. Her number, the pictures, the remnants of a life that was no longer mine. It was a final act of letting go. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I didn't need to keep holding on to what was already lost. And finally, I could breathe again. The following morning, I woke up to an onslaught of notifications, each one a reminder of what I had walked away from. My phone was buzzing nonstop, flashing with missed calls and unread messages. I had expected it, but I wasn't prepared for the emotional weight of it all. There were a few messages from Brian and Jake, checking in, offering support. But most of the messages came from Mia. Her name flashed across the screen in various texts, some pleading, others angry. And the voicemail? I didn't even bother listening to it. I already knew what was in it. I didn't need to hear her voice again, not when everything she had said over the past few months was a lie. I took a deep breath, staring at the phone as it vibrated on the table in front of me. Each message felt like a dagger, and yet each one also carried a strange sense of finality. This was it. This was the fallout. I let the phone buzz its way into silence before I picked it up and turned it off, setting it face down. A sense of peace washed over me, a peace I hadn't felt in days, maybe weeks. I didn't have to answer to anyone anymore. No more lies, no more excuses. Brian had told me not to isolate myself, that I needed to get out, find something to fill the void. But the truth was, I wasn't sure what that would look like. The life I had built around Mia, around the future we had imagined, was gone. The thing was, I didn't even know who I was without her. That thought lingered in my mind, gnawing at me as I stood by the window, staring out at the city. I had spent so many years wrapped up in what Mia needed, what she wanted, that I had lost sight of what I needed, what I wanted, the simple things. The things I used to enjoy before we got tangled up in this mess. I hadn't picked up my guitar in months. I hadn't gone to the gym in even longer. The last time I truly hung out with friends outside of the odd group dinner was too long ago to even remember. I wasn't sure where to start, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of what Mia had stolen from me. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door, my mind made up. The first stop? The gym. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The gym was quieter than usual for a Sunday afternoon, and I welcomed the silence as I walked through the doors. The hum of the treadmills and the clanking of weights felt almost like a foreign language to me. It had been too long since I'd stepped foot in a place that was supposed to help me feel better. I walked over to the free weights, taking a moment to scan the room. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like a walking zombie. I was more aware of my surroundings, more present. As I moved into my routine, pushing myself harder than I thought I could, I felt the pressure of everything fall away, bit by bit. Every rep, every set felt like a small victory. It wasn't about being the strongest or lifting the heaviest weight. It was about proving to myself that I could still take control. I could still do something for me. An hour later, I was exhausted but strangely satisfied. I'd pushed through the tension, the guilt, and the anger that had been clouding my thoughts. And for the first time in a while, I felt lighter. I walked out of the gym, taking a deep breath. And for the first time in a while, I didn't feel weighed down by Mia's betrayal. The next few days passed in a haze of routine. I started eating better, sleeping better, and even caught up with some old friends I hadn't talked to in months. I didn't expect to feel like everything was fixed. Nothing could fix that. But I felt like I was inching towards something better. The one thing I couldn't shake, though, was the constant flood of messages from Mia. Each one tugged at me, like a thread pulling me back into the past. She sent pictures of us, memories of the vacations we'd taken, the times we'd laughed until we cried. She apologized, again and again. She told me she loved me and couldn't live without me. The first few times, it almost felt like I was being pulled back into her web, but each time, I hit delete. I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. I wasn't going to be her backup plan. It wasn't easy, though. Each time I saw her name flash across the screen, a small part of me wanted to cave, to give her another chance. But I knew I couldn't. Not after everything. Not after what she had done. But I also realized something else. The more I ignored her, the more she fought. The calls came at odd hours. The texts became more desperate. And then, one evening, I received a new message. "Please, John, let's talk. I'm coming to your place tonight. I need to see you." I stared at the screen for a long moment. I felt that familiar pang in my chest, the one that wanted to reach out, to tell her everything was going to be okay. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't the person who would sacrifice my own happiness for hers. I set the phone down on the table and exhaled slowly. It was time to close the door for good. I didn't need to see her. I didn't need to hear her say how sorry she was. I needed to heal. I needed to move on. I left my apartment that night and drove to a small park on the outskirts of the city. I found a bench near the water, the same place I used to go to clear my mind. As I sat there, looking out over the calm surface of the lake, I felt something stir inside me, something small but strong. It was the beginning, a new chapter. I didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I was ready to face it head on, because whatever came next, I knew it had to be better than what I'd left behind. It had been weeks since I last heard from Mia. I'd blocked her number, deleted every message, every memory. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of her betrayal dragging me down. The anger and the hurt were still there, deep in my gut. But they weren't the first things I thought about when I woke up anymore. I had started going to the gym regularly again, channeling everything I had into getting stronger, physically, emotionally, mentally. I wasn't just rebuilding myself, I was reinventing myself. I was figuring out who I was, who I could be without her. One afternoon, Jake called me out of the blue. "You're still at the gym, right?" he asked, as if he already knew the answer. "Yeah, man," I said, wiping the sweat off my forehead. "I'm there pretty much every day now. It's been good." "Good, that's what I like to hear." "Listen, I've got something that might help you more than just the gym, though. You need to start getting back into things you used to love. Something for yourself, not just as some kind of recovery, you know?" I paused, letting his words sink in. Jake had a point. I had been throwing myself into fitness, trying to replace the time I spent thinking about Mia with a solid routine. But there was more to me than just working out. There was the guy I used to be, before all the pain, before all the lies. "Yeah, I know what you mean," I said slowly. "I just don't know where to start." Jake chuckled. "I've got a suggestion for you. I'll pick you up in an hour. We're gonna get back to something real. Something that doesn't involve your ex or your damn gym routine." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "All right, fine, I'll bite. What are we doing?" "You'll see," he said, a grin audible in his voice. A little over an hour later, I was standing outside my apartment building, waiting for Jake to pull up in his beat-up old truck. When he got out, he was holding something long and covered with a cloth. "What's this?" I asked, a grin already forming on my face. Jake just shrugged, still holding whatever it was like it was something precious. "You'll see. Just trust me." I didn't question him. I was used to his antics by now. He had a way of doing things that didn't always make sense at first, but always ended up being exactly what I needed. He opened the truck bed and revealed what was underneath the cloth. I stared at it for a second, trying to process what I was looking at. It was my old guitar. It had been gathering dust in my apartment for too long. I hadn't played it in years, not since the start of my relationship with Mia. I had forgotten how much I used to love playing. But there it was. The instrument that used to be an extension of me, the one I used to pour my heart into when words couldn't say what I needed to. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, shaking my head. "I haven't touched this thing in forever." Jake shrugged, clearly pleased with himself. "That's the point, man. You used to play, and you were damn good at it. Time to get back to what made you you. Music's therapy, right?" He was right. I'd been so wrapped up in trying to heal from everything with Mia that I'd neglected the things I used to do just for the sake of doing them. The things that made me happy before, all the drama and heartbreak. I reached for the guitar, feeling the familiar weight in my hands, the smooth wood, the strings that had long since lost their tension. It felt like stepping back into an old, comfortable pair of shoes. I sat down on the curb, tuning the strings absently. The sound was off, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was doing something for myself, something that was just mine. Jake sat beside me, leaning against the truck. "You want to play something?" I smiled at him, shaking my head. "I don't even remember half the stuff I used to play, but I'll try." The first few chords felt awkward, my fingers stumbling over the strings, but it didn't take long for the rhythm to come back to me. I played a simple melody, nothing fancy, but it felt right. Each note seemed to pull me closer to the person I used to be before everything with Mia took over. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. I wasn't just hiding from the pain anymore. I was embracing the freedom that came with letting go of the past. Jake sat quietly beside me, tapping his fingers on his knees. "There it is," he said, grinning. "I knew you still had it in you." I paused, looking at the guitar in my hands. It had been so long since I had played, so long since I had let myself be me, without worrying about anyone else's expectations or disappointments. "I didn't realize how much I missed this," I said quietly, more to myself than to Jake. "Yeah, man. Music, the gym, hell, even just going for a walk. Whatever it is that makes you feel whole, you've got to do it. Don't let it get lost again." I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. He was right. I had spent so much time trying to fix things for Mia that I had lost sight of who I was. But sitting there with my guitar in hand, hearing the sound of the strings again, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It wasn't about fixing myself. It was about reclaiming what was mine. "I'm going to keep playing," I said, my voice steadier now, "and I'm going to start doing the things that make me happy again." Jake grinned. "Hell yeah, you are." For the first time since everything went down with Mia, I felt like I was finally moving forward, and this time, It was on my terms. The future was wide open, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what was to come. It had been a few weeks since I picked up my guitar again, since I started working out and rebuilding the parts of me that had been buried for so long. I was making progress, slowly but surely. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had been taking time for myself, getting out of my head and reconnecting with the world around me. But there was still something missing, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Jake had been relentless in his mission to get me back into the world of life. I could see his effort, pushing me to get out, to meet people, to try new things. It wasn't that I didn't want to, I just didn't know where to start. But he was right. I had to keep moving forward, even if it felt like I was walking through a fog some days. That was when it happened. It was a Friday evening, and I had decided to stop by Brian's place for a drink. We'd been talking about doing something low-key to get my mind off things, but I hadn't been prepared for what would happen next. Brian's place was one of those cozy spots on the corner of a quiet street, low lights, a simple bar, and a few regulars who were mostly lost in their own conversations. It wasn't busy, and I liked it that way. I wasn't in the mood for crowds or noise, just a drink and a quiet evening. I had just sat down when I noticed her across the room, Rachel. She was standing at the bar, laughing softly at something the bartender had said. There was something about her, something that drew my attention. Maybe it was the way her eyes sparkled when she smiled, or the way she carried herself with that effortless confidence. She wasn't like anyone I had met before. Her presence was calm, easy, and completely unaffected. I tried not to stare, but I couldn't help it. She wasn't the type of woman who would go unnoticed. She was beautiful, but not in a loud way. It was subtle, like a melody that catches you off guard. She wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, but it suited her in a way that made it hard to look away. And then, of course, she looked over at me. For a second, I froze. She met my gaze with a smile, one that wasn't forced, wasn't calculated, just genuine. And I, being the awkward guy I had been for months now, gave her a small nod, trying to seem cool, trying not to let my heart race. The moment stretched out just a bit too long. Then she tilted her head, almost as if asking without words, "Are you going to come over, or what?" I hesitated, unsure of what to do. It had been so long since I had even thought about meeting someone new, let alone feeling a spark of interest. But something in her expression told me it was okay, that it wasn't a big deal. I stood up and walked over to the bar. "Mind if I join you?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my nerves were getting the best of me. She looked up from her drink and smiled, making room on the stool beside her. "Not at all," she said, her voice warm. "I'm Rachel." "John," I replied, sitting down next to her. "Nice to meet you." There was an easy silence between us for a moment, the kind that felt comfortable, not forced. It was the first time in weeks I hadn't felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. "What brings you here tonight?" she asked after a beat, turning slightly toward me, her elbows resting on the bar as she took a sip of her drink. I considered the question for a moment. Why was I here tonight? I wasn't sure. I had been avoiding most social situations, keeping to myself, and this felt like a break in that pattern. I wasn't looking for anything, but maybe that's exactly why it felt right. "Honestly, just needed a change of pace," I said, shrugging. "It's been a weird couple of months." Her expression softened, like she understood. "Yeah, I get that. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it." I nodded, appreciating her insight. "You could say that." We fell into an easy rhythm after that, casual conversation that flowed naturally, like two people who had known each other for years, even though we had just met. We talked about work, hobbies, things we like to do for fun, and somehow we just clicked. There were no forced silences, no awkward pauses. It was just easy. At some point, I realized how good it felt to talk to someone who wasn't wrapped up in the past, someone who didn't know about the pain I had been carrying. Rachel was just Rachel, someone in front of me, someone real. She didn't need to know about Mia or the betrayal I had lived through. It wasn't her burden to bear. I found myself smiling, genuinely enjoying the conversation. She had a way of making everything feel lighter, like she wasn't carrying around the weight of the world on her shoulders. "I'm glad I came out tonight," I admitted after a while. "I didn't think I was ready for something like this." Rachel raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a playful smile. "Ready for what? A drink with a stranger?" I laughed, shaking my head. "I guess so." Well, I'm glad you made the decision, she said, her smile softening. Sometimes you just need to take a step outside of your head, right? That hit me harder than I expected. It was exactly what I needed to hear. The whole reason I had been so lost these past few months was because I had kept myself stuck inside my own thoughts, mired in the past. I hadn't given myself permission to move on. Well, I'm glad you're here, I said, the words slipping out before I could second-guess them. Rachel's smile widened. Me too. As the night wore on, I felt something shift inside me. A small but important shift. Talking to Rachel, being with someone who didn't know my history, didn't carry my baggage, felt like a breath of fresh air. Maybe I wasn't ready to dive into anything serious, but I was ready to take small steps forward, ready to put myself out there, even just a little. At some point, we exchanged numbers, and I felt a small, hopeful flicker that hadn't been there for a long time. Maybe it was nothing, but maybe it was something. I wasn't sure, but for the first time in months, I felt open to the idea. As I walked out of the bar with her, the cool night air wrapping around us, I realized that this was the first time I had truly smiled in a long time, without the weight of guilt or pain on my shoulders. For once, it wasn't about the past. It was just about the present, and for the first time, I could see a future that didn't revolve around the betrayal, a future where I was allowed to move on. Maybe, just maybe, this was a new beginning. It had been months since I last saw Mia, and as I sat in the back of the event hall, the low hum of conversation around me felt oddly surreal. The evening had been meticulously planned, speeches, awards, networking, and everything else that went with it. The only difference this time, Mia was here too. And this time, I wasn't the one on the receiving end of her fake apologies and manipulative charm. I glanced across the room, my eyes locking on her. She was standing at the podium, speaking with a polished, confident smile as she addressed the crowd. She looked every bit the part of the woman she'd tried to present herself as during our years together. Successful, composed, in control. But I could see the cracks in the facade now. I wasn't the same person I had been when I last saw her. My life was different, and so was I. I had moved on to some extent. But there was one thing left I had to do. One last thing to prove to myself that I had truly let go. Tonight, at this work event, Mia was in the spotlight, just as she had always wanted. She was giving a speech, talking about the company's accomplishments, their future, and how proud she was of everything she had achieved. The same woman who had betrayed me, broken my trust, and destroyed the future we had dreamed of. And here I was, sitting in the back of the room, with Rachel by my side, looking on as if I had no connection to her at all. I was a different man, no longer the one who would let Mia manipulate me, no longer the man who bent over backwards for her. Rachel, sensing my shift in energy, leaned in, her soft voice breaking my focus. "You okay?" she asked, her hand brushing mine under the table. I glanced at her, her presence grounding me. It was strange how someone could make me feel so normal again, after everything I'd been through. "Yeah," I said quietly, squeezing her hand, letting her know I was more than fine. Just making sure I finished something. Rachel tilted her head, her brow furrowed in curiosity, but before she could ask, the host interrupted, signaling that Mia's speech was coming to a close. I took a deep breath. It was time. I pulled out my phone from my jacket pocket and typed a quick message. It wasn't much, but I knew it would hit where it hurt. I hit send, and within seconds, the message was delivered. "I hope you're enjoying the spotlight. Just wanted to remind you of the one thing you can't change. You'll always be the woman who betrayed me." I watched Mia from across the room as she glanced down at her phone, her face going pale the moment she read the message. She faltered for just a second, losing her train of thought, before she quickly regained her composure. But it was too late. Mia's perfect mask was starting to crack in front of the entire room. People around her glanced at one another, whispering, sensing something was off. But it wasn't just the message that was bothering her. It was the weight of her past, of everything she had done, catching up to her all at once. And I knew it. She couldn't hide from the truth anymore. I leaned back in my chair, my heart calm now. No longer angry, no longer hurt, just free. The sense of closure I'd been searching for was finally here. Mia had orchestrated everything to make herself the center of attention, but now I had the power. A few minutes later, I glanced at Rachel, who was watching me intently. She gave me a small smile, understanding exactly what had just happened, without needing any explanation. Mia had been playing the victim for so long, but now the tables had turned. The truth had been laid bare. And though I hadn't physically confronted her in front of the room, my message had done its job. The seed of doubt had been planted. She couldn't hide anymore. Mia, still flustered, quickly wrapped up her speech. Her words rushed as she finished. "Thank you all for your support. We've come so far, and we have even more to achieve. Thank you." The applause that followed was polite but muted, the energy in the room much lower than before. I could see Mia's face turning a deep shade of red as she stepped off the stage, her eyes scanning the crowd, her phone still clutched tightly in her hand. I didn't look back as she made her way toward the exit, flanked by her colleagues, her eyes darting around nervously, no longer the confident woman who had stood before the crowd moments ago. Rachel gave me a curious glance, but didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. We both knew what I had just done, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. "I think we can call that closure, don't you?" I said to Rachel, a quiet sense of victory settling in. She smiled, nodding. "I think you're right." We stood up, walking toward the exit, leaving the event behind. I didn't need to stay any longer. Mia had had her moment in the spotlight, but it was time for me to walk away from it all for good. I didn't need to say another word to her. I had won.